Our next speaker is Professor Patrick Bond. So as we welcome Professor Bond, Professor Bond is the professor at the University of Western Cape School of Government in South Africa. His academic research interests are in political economy, geopolitics, political ecology, and public policy. And he's also a prolific author, one of the most highly cited social sciences in South Africa. Welcome, Professor Bond.
Thank you very, very much. And it was great to see Salah's very sobering review of what's happening in his area. I think in my area, I'd like to give you maybe just two quick case studies in 2 minutes each. We lost one of our great anti-coal activists in an assassination just 6 weeks ago. And secondly, we lost 71 ordinary households, especially women and children, during a rain bomb of climate crisis and the lack of resilience and adaptation in Durban. I won't go into the third, which is the clean development mechanism, but I do want to mention where I think we could find some commonalities and solidarities. So Fikile Nchingazi was a wonderful 65-year-old, a leader of the Mfolozi Community Environmental Justice Organization. And so from the supply side of the climate crisis, the coal production, we see fightbacks in peasant areas where coal is being dug, in this case, right next to Africa's oldest game reserve, which is called Shlui Mfolozi. You can see the green called the Mfolozi Wilderness Area on the upper left. That's actually where the white rhinoceros, sorry, it's the southern white, because I know Salah will tell me, no, the northern white, we just lost that one, but the southern white, there were a couple of dozen in the world, and they were saved from extinction by conservationists working with the communities in Fuyeni and Somkele next door. And because there's a big coal mine, you see it right there, and Fikile Nchingazi led the Mfolozi Community Environmental Justice Organization, and that coal mine's run out of coal, and they want to expand another 222K of coal digging. She was opposing, she had a good lawyer, and they got in the way, and so she was assassinated. So this is one of the aspects where the women especially came out to say, no, no, stop the coal mining. Now, of course, men needed the job, so we haven't done something critical here, which is the just transition, which I'd like to propose. Some of the discussion about what can be done as an alternative to lower levels of violence, that is funding, that needs to become available. And one of the things that's being discussed now is going to the source of the original finance for that coal mine. Our old friends in Washington, the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, was the original funder. So the demand for reparations has already been made in the courts against the company, which is called Petmin, and its funder, which made lots of profits through equity investments. The World Bank, as well as a few others, should be paying to help set up an alternative so that the men and the women are not fighting, the men don't go around assassinating great leaders. Now, a second is the violence from the effects of climate crisis. And you've all heard that Cape Town nearly ran out of water 2 years ago. And this was the main dam, just down to nearly nothing. So 50 liters per day was what even the wealthy had to suffer. There is currently day zero in a drought-stricken area, including the 5th largest city in South Africa, Nelson Mandela Bay. So we know there's violence associated with the lack of water. And third, well, related was not just droughts, but floods. This flooding hit on Easter Monday, tragically, last year. So some rich people next to the beach lost, but really the violence, acknowledged by President Ramaphosa, whose prior job was as a coal company tycoon before he became president. And finally, a little bit of awareness from the elites, but they weren't really getting to the nub of the problem, which is not just that the house here, the rich people's house on the beach collapsed, but that houses were collapsing all over the low-income areas. And again, it's women and children in those houses collapsed, 71 killed. And the president recognized, look, we need to fix this problem. We have the money, so money will be mobilized. But this is one of the critical questions. Again, it was going to cost about $40 million to fix all the houses. Now, obviously, losing 71 people, it's priceless. You can't get a climate debt payment to fix and to climate proof. Unfortunately, to give you a sense of how difficult it is to claim climate debt, They only got 90 million. Now, this is up in a place, Durban, which is well known around the world as a climate resilient, climate adapted place. And you can just see how miserably they were by just getting less than a sixth of what was needed. It was much worse further up the coast, where more than 1,000 people died in cyclones a day, and Kenneth also in that same period, March, April of last year. We think we owe a climate debt. I mean, I know I do. I'm in the global north in the moment in Johannesburg with a frequent flyer card on the airline. I'm sure some of you would be just as guilty. So what do we owe? In South Africa, there's only 2 countries, Kazakhstan and the Czech Republic, with a higher CO2 emissions per GDP unit. Now, I'm using that, not the stats that put us at number 11 in the world, because we really need to think about a transformation of the economy. And that's where I think the inertia of political and social will is beginning to be turned around, particularly because we see finally, a little late in the day, the kids, like my 12-year-old daughter in Fridays for Future, saying, hey, you older people, you've messed up and you've got to do right by generational equity, right? So we've been seeing in Durban, in the central business district, protests beginning against the sources of this climate crisis. We've been seeing the urban protests in Cape Town, again in Durban, and in Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela Bay, and in the big city where all the headquarters of these big fossil fuel companies are, the coal companies, the oil and gas companies drilling offshore. That's Johannesburg. And oh, there's my daughter. Yeah, there she is on the left. Leaders stink equals the planet extinct. So they're teaching us a lot about what we need to do to make things right. And that includes paying a climate debt, an intergenerational debt, and a geographical debt to deal with these problems. So I wanted to just ask, where is the solidarity? I think it's from these people in Cape Town. They're linking the issues between climate and oil, right? The youth are coming up, and the people who are the problem, including Barack Obama, an African or half African, Jacob Zuma, the main African at the table, this is Copenhagen. What did they do? They blew up the United Nations, this League of Super Polluters in 2009. And this is the dilemma, isn't it? If you look at the cartoon, you see all the negotiators that go to the United Nations have in their own interests serving their industrial and fossil fuel industry. Let me wrap up this. In 2002, we hosted the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg. And we really learned, that the corporates were in control of this process, that they brought in phrases like sustainable development as a sort of, greenwashing. And we learned one African could stand up. This was in Copenhagen in 2009, and tell it like it is. We've been asked to sign a suicide pact, said Sudanese, the South Sudanese, who was the Sudanese ambassador to the UN and the head of the G77. That's Lumumba Diaping. What's Obama going to tell his daughters? The Kenyan relatives' lives are not worth anything. And he said African delegations were unprepared. Some members were lazy or bought off by the industrial nations. And South Africa was out to disrupt the unity of the bloc. South Africa plays a sub-imperialist role in league with these others against climate imperialism, right? The northern power, the power not to do anything to fix the UN. My last slide, I promise. The UN really has let us down. Insufficient global emissions reductions, no accountability mechanisms, ineffective carbon taxation, and no commitment to dealing with these failed carbon markets. No climate debt for the loss and damage or the unused carbon space, no just transition, no intellectual property relaxation on climate-friendly technology, no military, maritime, or air transport emissions discussed. And fossil fuel owners were not told to cease new exploration or revalue their unburnable carbon. So you tell me, is the solidarity going to be possible from the North, from Glasgow, from a Joe Biden administration with John Kerry, who is very much responsible for these fatal flaws? Well, I leave that as an open question. Sorry if I've gone on a little more than 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Bond.